going to go out on a limb today and in assuming that you all have heard of the Ten Commandments, right? Yeah. Raise your hand if you've heard of the Ten Commandments. Good. You've probably heard of them. You may not be able to list all of them. You come to confirmation class, we try to teach you those so you might memorize them. But something you're probably not aware of, the Ten Commandments as they appear in the Bible don't appear in the same forms. There are two different listings of the Ten Commandments. One comes in the book of Exodus, and one comes in the book of Deuteronomy, and those listings are not the same. The difference between Exodus and Deuteronomy's treatment of the commandments that intrigues me for today's reflection is found in the wording of the third commandment about the Sabbath. Exodus tells us that we are to honor the Sabbath because God didn't show up in his office on the seventh day. He didn't work. He rested, right? That's what Exodus says. That is not what the book of Deuteronomy says. The book of Deuteronomy says, I'm going to quote it here, "The seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord. You shall not do any work, you, your son or your daughter, your male or female slave, your donkey, your livestock, the resident alien in your town." Why? Well, Deuteronomy says, because you once were slaves in Egypt, and the Lord brought you out from that land with a mighty hand. Why are you supposed to practice Sabbath according to Deuteronomy? Because you remember how miserable it was working all the time for those oppressive Egyptians. And you are not going to impose that on other people. And you're not going to impose it on you. God set you free from that kind of misery. You are not going to live in it again, and you are not going to force others to live in that oppression. You will practice Sabbath so that social justice may be lived out. You and everybody, and the Bible says everything, including your dog and your cat and your donkey, will take a break. Because why? You are a free people. Now, our first reading from Isaiah speaks to a bunch of exiles who have come home to Jerusalem. And what have they found when they come home to Jerusalem? Great disappointment. The promise was that Jerusalem was going to be great again, but that greatness didn't happen. The city still looked devastated, and the temple hadn't been rebuilt. Isaiah, trying to encourage his audience while reminding them that they have a role to play in the city and nation's renaissance, says, "Your ancient ruins shall be rebuilt." That's a reference to the temple. A good future will be established for your kids and your grandkids. But the good future, Isaiah is saying, can't be based on social injustice, on the rich oppressing the poor, on you doing whatever you want whenever you want to do it. The prophet says, if you refrain from trampling the Sabbath, from pursuing your own interest on my holy day, if you call the Sabbath a delight, if you honor it, not going your own ways, serving your own interest and pursuing your own affairs, then you shall take delight in the Lord, and I will make you ride on the heights of the earth. For Isaiah, the future for the people of God will depend upon their awareness of the needs of others. It will depend upon their practicing justice, living into the freedom, living into the delight of the Sabbath. Sabbath keeping, since it's all about freedom, will be a necessary component of a good and prosperous future and community. Sabbath, the word literally means ceasing, stopping, will be in part how freedom is lived out, how justice will be maintained. The well-being of the community will be dependent upon the well-being of all. And the well-being of all will not just be about you pursuing your own interests or affairs. The delight of the Sabbath will mean that the wide distinctions between the haves and the have-nots will be eliminated. The delight of the Sabbath will mean that everybody is included, and this is most important, that everybody will get to rest. Now, isn't it interesting that something that is about delight and freedom can become in practice something that makes people crabby? Something that feels nothing like freedom. And note Luke's story today, great story. And I love that part that Paul emphasized. Jesus saw a woman, because you see, other folks hadn't been seeing her. She'd been hanging around for 18 years, and nobody saw her. They didn't want to look at her. It was too hard. But Jesus sees a woman, and Jesus heals this woman who has been crippled for 18 long years, who has been bent over and unable in any way, physically or emotionally, to stand up straight. Now, you would think that everybody'd be happy about that. Happy for the woman, for the freedom that she receives from Jesus who heals her. No, not the case. A crabby person quoting the Bible complains. There are 6 days on which work ought to be done. This woman ought to come on those days and get healed. We're good Jews. We honor the Sabbath. We don't do work on the Sabbath. Jesus, one who is rooted in freedom, one who loves to set people free, responds to the crabby man and says, "You hypocrites, don't you on the Sabbath untie your donkey and lead it to water? Ought not this woman who has been bound up for 18 long years, who, by the way, is a daughter of Abraham, by the way, has significance, and she matters, should she not be freed from her bondage on the Sabbath? Because after all, the Sabbath is about freedom. What would be a better day to cure and free this woman than on the day of the Sabbath, the day of freedom?" Think about how in church history the Sabbath has been viewed as anything but a matter of freedom. Crabby people throughout church history worried about who's mowing their lawn on Sunday, who's riding their bikes on Sunday. And the Sabbath then becomes this noose around people's necks. You were naughty if you did work on Sunday, and we were watching to make sure you didn't. You should be napping or praising the Lord. You sure shouldn't be doing anything fun. When I was a kid, I didn't know much about this Sabbath-keeping stuff. I came from Ohio, and there weren't a lot of Reformed people around there in Ohio. And so one year we traveled to Michigan for the week. And for some reason, we went through Grand Rapids on a Sunday. And the only thing I remembered about that city when I was a kid was that they didn't have any restaurants open when I badly needed a restaurant. I whined, as I was prone to do when I was that age, and complained because I was so hungry. Those Grand Rapidians were opposed to food, and I needed it in the worst way. Sabbath keeping seemed to me, as an immature and yes, whiny child, to be a burden that made people crabby. Sabbath, that which is intended to be a delight, becomes an encumbrance, a millstone hung around the neck, something that makes us cantankerous and judgmental. Now, but before you feel like you're let off the hook because you're nothing like that, if we're at all honest, we would admit that's not really our issue, though, is it? We modern ELCA Lutherans, many of us here are, tend not to be rigid, grouchy folks who turn rocks upside down to discover the people who are mowing their lawns on Sunday. We might even be the folks who laugh a bit at the city of Zeeland, who just this past week was considering whether it was okay to sell beer on Sundays. Our religious perspectives are different than the more rigid traditions. And what's more, our views and the views of many these days, even our more conservative Sabbath-keeping friends, are being shaped by a changing culture. It's a different world today than it was 40 years ago. So does that make Sabbath-keeping irrelevant? Have we moved we're way beyond that. Are we people who are so free that we don't need to keep it in our discipleship repertoire? I suspect not. In some ways, if we understand Sabbath keeping to be about freedom, this commandment may be more vital for us than we ever could have imagined. For you and I are living in a time when and among a people for whom time tyrannizes our and their lives. And Sabbath keeping is primarily about limiting and overcoming the tyranny of time. How many people these days, I've been one of them, I've heard you all, how many of you are saying frequently, I just don't have the time. I just don't have the time. For too many of us, the clock runs our lives. We go from thing to thing to thing, from activity to activity to activity. We even have to schedule playtime for our kids. Got to get that on the calendar, as if play is one more thing we got to add to their to-do list. Many of us have more money than we have time. We'll write a check for something, but give our time? We don't have time to give time. We are tyrannized by our schedule, by the availability of 24-hour-a-day news, by time that is such a limited commodity. Sabbath keeping is meant to be a delight. It is meant to be about freedom. Freedom from the tyranny of time over our lives. And God, we are being told by the Scriptures, is a God of freedom. God is the one who took us out of the hands of the Egyptians, the people who kept us slaves, who made us work all the time, who did their darndest to try to control time. But we don't live in Egypt anymore. We live in the land of freedom. We don't have to work all the time. We can take naps. We can frolic in the woods. We don't have to schedule our kids to death. Our human worth as human beings is not dependent upon our filling every moment with activities that justify our and our kids' existence. We can worship freely, openly, give time for it all the time. We're free from the tyranny of time. We can be Sabbath keepers. Not so that we can make ourselves and other people miserable and crabby, but so that life can be the rich experience that it is meant to be. So that life indeed is the delight God made it to be, so that time doesn't run the show. Now, as I think about it, you and I live in light of the tyranny of time, not simply because we schedule ourselves to death, and I've been thinking a lot about this lately, but because this thing called death makes time and its passage a matter of terror. Death makes time a threat to us. Fundamental to the Christian message is that death has been swallowed up in victory. That in the resurrection of Christ, time has been put in its appropriate place. Therefore, we can be free from its tyranny. As the book of Hebrews puts it, a Sabbath rest remains for the people of God. Rest for troubled bodies, rest for a racing mind, rest for unsettled hearts, rest from broken relationships, rest from the constant clamoring to prove ourselves, rest from sin's power over us, rest from anxiety and fear. So, as the book of Hebrews says, let us therefore make every effort to enter that rest. Or as my seminary professor Leland Elhart used to put it, let us restlessly pursue the rest of God. Amen.